Hello, hello. Welcome to we are probably going to be here for a little while, Nationals Gauntlet video. So this is actually the second Nationals Musings type of video that I've tried to make. The first one was kind of more of a slideshow thing, but after talking through it a couple times and doing a couple times, I didn't really like what it was doing, so I scrapped it as part of the big yapping videos I had. But I decided instead, what if we tried to put together just like a gauntlet of decks? Just a bunch of decks that are worth testing against, right? Things that we either know will show up or that represent something that you might run into. Remember, this is going to be a 9 or 10 round Swiss tournament. There's this diversity promo up for grabs. There are going to be some number of people just trying stuff that's way off the radar. And I decided a fun way to go about it that might be a little more interesting to view and interesting for me to do and good as an exercise, like healthy as an exercise to go through the format, right? I wanted to build 2 decks on each symbol to sort of get a look at what each symbol is kind of doing, get a look at some of the cards, that sort of thing. So we have 24 decks here then, 24 decks to go through. Hopefully try not to spend too much time on each, but we are one taking this. If I ramble about each deck for 5 minutes, then it's going to be a 2-hour video, and that's just what it is. But we'll see. Bunch of disclaimers. A great number of these are version 0 lists that I was like, we should have a such and such deck on the gauntlet, and how would I build this to start out, right? Well, what would version 0 look like? These are not all iterated on or worked on in any meaningful way. I would not just take one of these decks wholesale and walk into Nats with it or anything like that. And certainly, not all of these decks are going to be quote-unquote real contenders, right? Not all of these are going to be decks that are without significant flaws or whatever. But they're all things where they represent things that I think you might run into, and they can be worth doing a match or two against, right? Even if you wouldn't necessarily play it at Nats, that doesn't mean somebody else wouldn't decide that they would play this at Nats, right? So I think all of these have some amount of merit in checking into, and obviously the big obvious we're going to see this deck, those characters are in here. Not every viable character's in here. There's way more than 24 viable characters for sure. There's some stuff like Midnight that got left out here because it didn't line up with the symbols. And yeah, some of these choices are going to come from, we're trying to make 2 of each symbol thing work, right? But I thought it was worth doing nonetheless. I think it was interesting for me to go through and build all these decks, and hopefully interesting for viewers to sort of look at them and talk about them a little bit and maybe try them out. Or try to test against them, right? At the very least. So, without further ado, these are just going to be in symbol order, so it might be a little before we get to some of the big obvious names. And naturally, a lot of these characters can be played on a bunch of different symbols, but first and foremost, for one of our air decks, we have an Asui. Asui is still around. She's still very good. You still have some cognizance of what your Asui matchup looks like. And so we have an air Asui here, and the reason for air, aside from the symbol stuff, is it has meteor for Frotzkis, which some people are going to want to try. It gets to put 2 speed on Indiscriminate Shock, which is also very good. It gets a valid poke in Chimera Crack, and you still get Nedry Wave. You get a lot of nice stuff on air for Asui. Obviously, the downside is that you're an air 7-hander, and you kind of need to, really play tight defense to pull that off, because you don't have, the big breakers that some other symbols have, or things like that. And there's a lot of noise about Loving Father in life, but you have latent skill on air that's close enough a lot of the time. It's nice to not have to find duplicates of something to get a little card draw going on, a little card selection, so yeah. Not a whole lot to talk about here in terms of, standout fancy stuff. Observant Student is a nuts deadlock for every Asui ever. You have Engine Trouble. There's some filling out of low blocks here, but Limiting of the big 3 puts damage on most of her moves. That's good. That's something Asui likes. Air has spammable damage now, which it did not have before. It's part of the reason you never saw an Air Asui before, is how are you going to add up the damage. But between some spammable damage here and for Frotzkis and Nedry Wave even, Air Asui can actually deal some damage now. So, if you're looking for an Asui list to test against, this is one that you can try. Our second air deck, no surprises, is Air Jiro. Jiro, of course, can also be built off the good symbol. She can be built 2 different ways off of the good symbol, but if I had to guess, I would say that most of the Jiros you might run across are going to be the air symbol sort of traditional build. One thing I'll call out here is Save a Million Strike is seeing increased play in Giro lists. This is almost sort of replacing the instant explosive release. Kind of plays the same role of like I want to get a quicker momentum than usual. You know, she can block, but if she's going second, she can still have that momentum on turn 2 without having to like lead with a comet and have another comet later. Pillar Swing also pretty popular in Air Giros now. Pretty good massive dunk. Other than that, you know, again, nothing too shocking, nothing we haven't seen from Air Giros before. Actually, it doesn't have very many new cards outside of Save a Million Strike. You know, obviously, second place last year's Nats, showing up in top cuts still at plenty of regionals. Deck's still good. Air Giro, you know, certainly should be, you know, in your Nationals Gauntlet for sure. Next symbol's going to be all, and people are going to be, what the heck kind of all deck we do? What kind of all decks are we going to have? Nobody likes all. So first we have an All Might 3. I think all is a perfectly valid symbol for All Might 3. It might even be his better symbol. I mean, obviously, people are used to seeing him off of the good symbol. What the all symbol gives you... So, back when we had One with Nature, you had some All Might 3 decks that were just like, I'm going to draw all the cards and I'm going to discard them to this One with Nature outlet. And that, you know, we're going to take advantage of all the cards that All Might draws to fuel all these discard outlets. We don't have One with Nature anymore, but we still have Snack Time. And we have Prone to Dry Eyes. And heck, we have Intense Snare. So this is one of those version 0 decks. I don't know if running 10x total discard outlets is actually a good idea, but that's what we're starting with. And, you know, the all symbol also gives you Rapid Punches and Hardened Barrage. There it is. You still have Texas Smash, right? You still have those punches. You still have Valiant Assault. Running a couple Detroit Smash because it goes along with the theme. We're going to draw a million cards, discard a million cards. We get Sugar Rush this time. You know, all good cards, plenty of good stuff you get to do. I like Unexpected Hero for All Might because if they do the thing where they empty their hand and say, okay, you can't kill me, you don't have damage. Well, I flip +3 damage if your hand is empty, right? This is pretty cool. Yeah, something to try out. All Might 3 just as a character is worth having in your gauntlet because if you're a deck that's holding a bunch of cards, you could very well run into an All Might 3 and suddenly all his moves have 4 speaks. You're holding so many cards. It's like, well, now what, right? You have to learn how to manage that. I put Eyes of the Tiger in a lot of these sideboards. Obviously, I've been working on these decks for a week or two. I'm not sure how strongly I feel about this card, but I slammed it in some sideboards kind of as some awareness, but obviously, with all of these, there's going to be lots of individual card choices you could tinker with if you were going to play them for real, right? But the other all deck that we have is an all Dobby 3. So Dobby's here to represent the stupid throw deck, right? Because there's always the stupid throw deck, right? Every event of a sufficient size, there will be a handful of stupid throw decks of people that are just there to throw you to death. This could also do this with All Might 2. It's probably going to be one or the other. Dobby 3 plays a little bit better where there's a lot of even numbers on All's throw contingent. But you get to go, you know, search out Capture Evildoers to do a bigger string if you want. But they could equally be All Might 2 or play one side the other is probably pretty likely. Tam did pretty well with a deck like this at Kansas City RLE. I don't have the list, I didn't look at it, but I'm assuming it's probably pretty similar to this. Playing some actions, I Am Here is just a good action to just play. You either get 3 speed on one of these throws and make your opponent deal with something they weren't really expecting to deal with 3 speed on a throw, or you get a straight early build. 7 Hand says we're a little fragile. We're playing some red guards. We're main decking a bunch of Evading Copy, which is a very good card right now. We don't really have like a whole lot of foundation needs for this kind of attack lineup, so we just get to play like 4 convenient timing and stuff like that. 3 hero killer, who cares? We just kind of get to play this stuff, which is pretty cool. Yeah, so, you know, all Dobby 3, sideboard All Might 2, take your pick, back or forth. But definitely try to test against a throw deck at some point. Our first Chaos deck is Chaos Amajiki. This is a very known quantity, this list. You know, it's going to be an amalgamation. There's been a bunch of Amajikis and Top Cuts. Shouldn't be a whole lot surprising here if you've been paying attention to the meta. You might have missed the Death Arms Wallop tech. Death Arms Wallop is a terrifying card in Amajiki. He gets to that point in the game where he has like 5-6 momentum, and then he can put, it's 5 momentum, he puts +7 damage on this thing, powerfuls it for 10 damage, gives it +10 speed, and you need a reset or you're dead to it, right? So that is a huge threat. We're like 2 main 1 board, so you kind of have to figure out if they have resets or if they're just too fast of a deck to actually get to that critical mass for it. But also the flip 1 committed Rival Foundation is not nothing. Everything else, pretty par for the course. It's Chaos Amajiki things. I know we've seen some Blitz Rushes in a couple builds. I just got slammed with one of those this afternoon for a bunch of damage. That card's actually kind of scary here, but I left it out. Not a whole lot here. You'll see different amounts of damage, of like attack deletions. Some decks are running 4 Psyche and 4 Duplicate. Some are running like 2 of just 1 of them. Kind of did the in-between here, playing Irrefutables, because I always play Irrefutable. Encouraging Training Partner, very good card. People kind of sleep on too much. But yeah, Amajiki things. This will certainly be present. Amajiki's in that pool, so we pretty much know that there's going to be a pretty good chunk of overhauls at this event, we assume. What we don't know is, first of all, what the Life-Earth mix of those overhauls is going to be, and second of all, we don't really know. There's this pool of like 6 or 7 or 8 characters that they could be 3% of the field or they could be 10% of the field, and we really just don't know where they are in that range. Like, Jiro's one of those decks. Amajiki is one of those decks too. You know, in a 400-person event, there could be 10 Amajikis or there could be 30 or 40 Amajikis, and I don't think we'd be surprised either way, right? It's just what are people going to land on. But yeah, certainly a quality deck. We have a Chaos deck here. We have a Chaos Nejire, and you know, we say this before every event. Somebody out there has a Nejire that they've been working on forever, that they're going to show up to Nationals with, and people are suddenly going to realize that Nejire is a very good character. So we have a Chaos list here as our second Chaos deck. One thing I really like about Chaos Nejire is Cremation. If you do that turn 1 Cremation play on your turn 1 going second, when you're building, you just gain the 2 health back. So this doesn't even cost health in Nejire, which is pretty cool. As well as being a speed bonus in your damage boost character. Yeah, you know, Chaos 7-hander puts 2 damage on everything is a pretty good model. We can make Twisting Azure Inferno live with a myriad of things. You know, either we Cremation or Manifest on it, or we put some damage with Vast Hybrid or Basic Training or whatever. So Azure Inferno is pretty live here. We have Ice Storm, good Chaos card. Spiral Blast is a really good card. You know, Ice Wall. There's a bunch of different angles this deck can come at to fashion a quality offense. It's a Chaos list. You could be doing ally stuff in here too, for sure. I wanted the Frigid Heatwave card draw, but obviously Pigeon Flock is arranged itself, so it doesn't stop you from running that. But I went with the sort of straight pure ranged package here. And again, version 0. League of Villains, worth mentioning. That card is good, and it's hard to fit always in some decks, but if you can include it in your main or side, it's pretty nice to have in a lot of cases. Next, we have Death. Alright, Death Bakugo 1. This is the deck I ran at the Rochester RLE. We have changed it up a little bit. I haven't talked too much about that deck, I guess, in any videos or anything, so basically the idea is I kind of like a lot of Death's defensive tools right now, but if you want to run a bunch of those, then your character kind of needs to take care of your offense for you. And it's almost like a reverse mindset of the Death Eraser heads, where you're using the character for the defense, you're just playing a bunch of offensive foundations. But so he is, but Bakugo, he will eventually kill darn near anything, right? His good strings, he does these pokes, he doesn't really care if you block them or not. If you don't block them, he gets momentum, he gets closer to winning, he feeds a Cyclone for big string later. If you do block them, cool, they're at a progressive. He's got a lot of card draw, you know, has some pretty good reach. So, you know, the changes I've made since the Rochester RLE to this list, I've taken out the Excited for Blood package. Big sad. Confession's really fun, but I decided I'd rather have some Shock Absorption, basically. So Shock Absorption's in, Excited for Blood's out, another Latent Skill's in, a couple other copies moved around here and there. We got the League of Villains in here that I was just talking about. Yeah, this deck can be tricky to face. It probably won't turn to you. It can, right? It can draw the absolute nuts like many decks can, but it is, you know, very hard to defend ad infinitum, right? Sooner or later it's going to get you, so you really need to figure out how to get through, you know, the card draw and some of the blocking. There's a bunch of defensive tools like Spooky and learning the standards and Desperate Struggles that it has access to, with more into the boards of all those cards. Struggling with Studies, obviously. It's going to be a tricky deck to face, so I figured it was fine to have this in here. The other Death deck is, of course, Ochako 2. This is kind of an amalgamation of some of the Ochako 2s that Top cut. I'm not an Ochako 2 expert myself. I just lose to it all the time. So I kind of looked at a bunch of those and kind of mixed them up and put together a list. No, let's see. If you've seen Death Ochako 2, you kind of know what's up now. We've got the Fury lineup. You know, double Turn to Dust, double Hulking Grimace, double Vile Seizing, or Touch Sun Grenade just to get some cards. Nitro Explosion is just the most annoying 7-speed high in the world. Main skill, first day of class, pass some checks. I put Learning the Standards in here because that card's just really good right now, and I'm putting it everywhere I can. I'm even putting this in 7-handers at this point. Prehensile Tail, great card. Not a lot to say. You know, Ballerina's great for her. Yeah, Ochako 2 things. You should definitely, like, give Ochako 2 a look. If you haven't tested against Ochako 2, it's worth doing, because it's 33 health you have to get down, and her stuff all has +2 speed, and it can be very scary. So definitely make sure you check that box. Earth, first Earth deck, Earth Nomu. I think he's made enough deep top cut runs that you would want him in a Gauntlet anyway, because Nomu's such an unusual deck, but certainly now, right, he's definitely in that somewhere between 3 and 10% of the field range. There's gonna be some Earth Nomus. They're gonna be doing the Relentless Barrage thing. The exact mix of other attacks, little unclear. Cowler counting probably in all of them. Some have Muscle Maulers, some don't. Some will have Tetra Terra, some won't. I put them both in here in a couple copies. Sneaky amounts of speed with, like, quick to act. We've got a couple Talented Baker in this one. You know, someone with style. If you've been paying attention, you've been seeing these decks. This is just another version of it. We have a couple cheeky charged shield breakers in the board if you're a really defensive deck. Those can come in and suddenly give you a big headache. You know, here's my 9 mid for 12. I mean, okay, you blocked it, great, but, you know, I've got more attacks, right? But it is a 2-check, so we're not maining that, but it is there in the sideboard to come in if it's really good. Yeah, Nomu, very scary. He's thought of as an all-mids deck. That people usually label it as the mids Nomu, but he can definitely run some cheeky... He usually has some Hardened Chops or some Rapid Punches as like a low mix-up, and he can definitely run Tetra Terror, which is a heck of a high attack to have to deal with. So, you know, don't completely sell out to the mids against him. You might need to think about the other zones, but yeah, the big player is the Relentless Barrage string, right? The other Earth deck we have is going to be an Earth Mimic. This certainly could have been Earth Overhaul, but I did go with the Life Overhaul later on. Mimic is a weird one. It's kind of worth just having a Mimic in your Gauntlet pool to try him out. You can build Mimic on any symbol, and on all of the symbols there's like multiple different deck directions you can go. What I did with this, I kind of tried to... I didn't see like the exact lists that were floating around the Gen Con bubble, but there were a couple Earth lists that were running Final Exam Gutshot. And so the idea here is that, you know, your character does some cool things, puts a lot of damage on moves, doesn't necessarily help land the moves. You can end up at a place where you're facing a Racerhead or whatever, just isn't going to die. Well, the other thing, you can plan B with Mimic. You can, every time you check an asset, you can pick up a Final Exam Gutshot, you can play the Final Exam Gutshot, and you play a thick deck. This one is 71 cards in this case. And you will win by mill, right, if they can't kill you either. And so we've got Naval Laser Beam to unflip some of Earth's flippy defensive tools. You know, if you one of the things about Earth's is that its speed reduction is all on flips, for the most part, or destroying your So Obvious's case. So Naval Laser Beam unflip them is pretty good. We have enough punches from Polno Punches. Now, a funny story. This is the last deck I made a bunch of edits to before this video because I talked to Kevin earlier today. I'm like, man, I have this Earth Mimic list for this video, but I don't really know what I'm doing with it. And he listed all these cool cards that he was playing at Gen Con, and I had none of them in my list. So we've modified it a little bit with Kevin's advice. But it really is, there's so many cards you could play in this list that if you want to. But you know, Redguard, it has great tutorable blocks. You can tutor for Innocent Shining for Lash block when that's good. You can tutor for the +0 high block when that's the Breaker 2 mid block when that's good. So very good, can be a very good defensive character. We've seen some very aggressive Chaos Mimics as well, but it's good just to get in there with a Mimic a little bit and just watch the character operate and get a feel for what he's doing no matter what type of Mimic it is. Alright, water break. Next, what's the next symbol? Is it good? It's evil! Evil Tabe! I lost to this deck in Rochester. It continued, it went all the way to top 4. You know, I talked to Kevin about his matchup with it, with that Momo, and he basically said, like, I would believe that this is a 50-50 matchup with Momo, possibly. He just happened to win the games that they played. Yeah, who knows, so it's not like we have a huge sample size of that. But in any event, he seems real enough. He's a pretty exciting character. He's pretty fun to play. Or looks fun to play. I haven't tried him. So we could see more people picking him up. Pretty much just took Scott's list and put some pet cards in. I swapped the sticky balls for Vial Season because I think most people end up doing that. I don't know if it's correct or not, but I think most people that sort of copy the Tabe are going to end up doing this. Just play Vial Seasoning over the Eat My Sticky Balls. It makes sense, in theory. Made the deck a little bit smaller, made it a type 50 cards because Insatiable Appetite is just such a big bomb for you and just want to find all of them. We got a couple Barrier Shields from some added defensive trickery. But yeah, if you saw the deck, or if you didn't see the deck, I guess, Tabe is sneaky good. He's kind of similar to Bakugo, where if you block, and in Tabe's case, with a lot of his cards, even if you don't block, he's going to get to draw a card, he's going to take a thing in your card pool, he's going to make your check get -1. So even though he has a 6 on him, he's very often, a 7 or an 8. And if you're playing tight on Foundations, he's going to chip away at those as you block. And he gets these synergies with Catching a Ride and Tentacle Strike, where he gets bonus benefits from clearing your card pool, and he can clear his card pool. And it's really tough to defend against. It's kind of like Bakugo. You're probably not going to defend against this thing forever. Defense, a little bit suspect. He does have the 3 sticky balls. We could put a couple Barrier Shields in here. Insatiable Appetite peels some momentum away. It makes momentum actively dangerous because it goes into your card pool and feeds Tabe. In addition to being, a huge move. So be careful about when you take momentum and how you're feeling about it against Tabe for sure. Tongue has, type 50 cards. Pretty much an aggro deck. Play some defensive tricks, run away in the sideboard. Worth checking a test against if you have the chance. And the other evil deck we have is an Evil Endeavor 2. So I'm a known Endeavor 2 stan. I needed to get him in here somewhere. He's a bit of a different guy to try to face because he's -4 speed on the face. Really on these symbols especially is not something you're necessarily used to seeing. He can give all his text 2 damage if he needs to. He can give all his text 2 speed if he needs to. And then he has a little bit of damage reduction, which is a little more relevant on Earth with learning the standards and whatnot, because you can make an attack do less damage and then learning the standards it. But yeah, this one is running the Excited for Blood Confession package, because I really like that. But, again, kind of a version 0 list. Nick Reagan did make a top cuts with an Evil Endeavor. There's some attempt to update it here. Compression Sphere is a really cool trick with Excited for Blood. You can make them lose health when they're attacking you, and then draw some cards or gain some health off of it. We've got a bunch of +1 damage buttons, bench press, brute strength. You try to make it so that we can use Endeavor for speed more often than not. Quick to act, he can, if you get him to 17, he can get himself down to 15 pretty quickly and then start turning quick to act on. Kind of a lean aggressive deck, but Endeavor has this built-in defense to him. We put some twisties in here. We have some showdowns as a big defensive bomb block. We can still play co-op offers, obviously very good right now. Worth checking in on this guy. Is you never really think too much about him. Then when you face him, you realize that it is a little bit different to play against. People think he's just kind of El Generico, right? But those abilities on his character, the defensive ones, can be a little tricky to work around, so worth giving him a look. And we have Fire. So Fire Kendo Rappa, another one of the 3 to 10% club for sure. He'll be there. He could be the best aggro deck in the format. It's not like we have any clear definition of that right now, but it's probably either Rappa or Jiro or something that people just aren't playing that much, right? A very high conversion rate in terms of the number of Rappas that have registered versus the number that have top cut. So, it's pretty much a cookie cutter Rappa here. I didn't want to mess with the formula too much. I am running Irrefutable because I think it's crazy not to, basically. And I stuck some Knuckle Sandwiches in just because I kind of felt like I wanted a second decent damage dealing move. This can be Hardened Barrage also, which does some good damage. We have Hardened Barrage in here anyway. I think a couple of them were like a couple calorie counters or just extra copies of stuff or just less attacks overall. I think a lot of them are just 16 attacks with 4/4/4/4. But I kind of like having the low, chunky damage guy in here. But yeah, it's Rappa. It is 50 cards or close to it. This one's actually 52, and we want to draw multiple copies of Bullet Punches. We're going to play a whole bunch of things that draw cards. I put in Revel for a little bit of extra damage output. Sometimes you'll see the the Shoji card window shopping as an extra quote-unquote draw card. Sometimes you'll see Big Appetite as a flip, draw one, discard one, just really, really selling out. I pulled it back a little bit for this list, but so you'll see some variation there. We saw some Charged Shield Breaker in a Rappa in top cuts, but definitely, whatever you do with the list, test against Rappa for sure. Some kind of Rappa list. And the other fire deck, we have Fire Tokiyami. This Swiss Champ's Gen Con, or a Fire Tokiyami's Swiss Champ Gen Con. He's still Tokiyami. He still does his Tokiyami things. He still plays Twisting Azure Inferno, plays another action, makes your checks awful, plays a bunch of attacks, makes them huge, slams them in. Again, probably a little bit less greedy than the Gen Con build. I didn't bother going in on the mill Yahtzee cards where you mill it and you get an effect. But, we have a pretty good slate of spam. We have the Latents, the Irrefutables, a little bit of defense, and Desperate Struggle and Area Shield. You can still run Chaos Tokiyami as well. We put him in Fire here, but Chaos is certainly equally valid. Fire might... It's hard to say which one has better defense at this point. I guess they both have Ice Storm, but Fire has Barrier Shield, which is pretty cool, and Desperate Struggle, and in Chaos you have Encouraging Training Partner. So you could see either one, but it's never not worth checking in on your Tokiyami matchup for sure. Now we have the good symbol, Mirio. Of course, Mirio's got to be in here. You could definitely see an Air Chaos Mirio. There are merits to playing those, but 90% of them are going to be off of the good symbol. At least stateside, North American side, he's sort of waned, not necessarily in popularity, but in terms of results, he's kind of not looked great the past couple of events. People are kind of gotten used to facing him. He is ultimately not putting a lot of speed on things on his face. He's kind of just +2 damage man if you can handle the zone mix-up stuff. But nonetheless, still a nice, simple, popular character. You're decent chance you're going to face one in Swiss. I'd say he's between the 3 and 10% club, but it's probably more like the 5 and 10% club. He's going to be at least 5% of the field, but we'll see how many people who are still just sort of gravitating to him, once they've had a bunch of time to test him into a bunch of matchups. The attack lineup, we're familiar by now. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can do this. I'm going with Rewind, Throttle, Valiant Assault, Hardened Chop, because I'm a Hardened Chop stan, basically. But there are the BMI Buster lines. We're trying not to play too many printed mids, but we still have Valiant Assault, I guess. But I'm not big on the Hardened Jab and Mirio, for instance. But yeah, he's going to play attacks. He's going to make them whatever zone he thinks you're least prepared to block or that he most wants you to block with. And he can, pull no punches or Phantom Threat to get a momentum, capture evildoers, clear his pool, draw cards with Valiant Assault, play more attacks. We're running Unrivaled Combatant because I tell everybody to run this card in their Mirios because it counters Cooperation Offer, kind of. Right? It at least puts it back to whatever zone you want to put it back to. But yeah, I didn't put Airy in here. I don't know if that's really correct or not, but that is one thing that I'm noticing as I look at this. It's a little bit excluded. I think most of them will probably run an Airy or two, but I guess it's been like 50-50 the list I looked at. But yeah, obviously, test against Mirio, that kind of goes without saying for this format. What's the other good deck? Oh, we have Good Momo. So I don't know how many people are actually going to try to take Kevin's list from Rochester and play around with it, but it is quite good. And so I wanted to get it in here. It's not his exact list. Nobody's going to play Kevin's exact list. Kevin's not even going to play his exact list. If he plays this at Nats, he'll change 6 cards that morning randomly. That's just how he rolls, but it is pretty much his list. The only changes I made were basically to try to get a little more deadlock in the main deck, playing a couple pet card Gecko Stomps, basically, and a couple more copies of some of the assets. Because I've seen this deck fail to find training weights and kind of flounder a little bit, so I put the 3rd training weights in, but that could be wrong. He could come and say that having Ares is way more important than that, but in any event, you've probably, you saw a bunch of stream matches for this at the Rochester Rally. If you're not familiar, so the big thing with the Good Momo, it's still doing the ally package stuff that the life ally weapons Momo gets to do, except that when you do that on the good symbol, you get access to a bunch of Echo. You get Double Trouble and Twin Sword Slicer. Double Trouble you can tutor for with UA High. Twin Sword Slicer you can tutor for with Momo. You have a bunch of momentum generation, and really compared to the life build, the good build puts that momentum to some better use. It's not just, okay, well, I can make my home run comet really big and hope it hits, right? You can put that momentum into entire extra attacks using these echo moves, and also put it into capture evildoers to extend your string, right? So it has that momentum generation out of the ally package, but it's really using them a lot better. In exchange, you lose some of life's cool defensive tools, right? But you're still Momo, you still defend like crazy, you still passing the torch, you still tutor for whatever block you want 17 different ways. So yeah, it's a pretty cool deck. It can be pretty tough to fight into. It's definitely worth giving it a look as part of your gauntlet, just because historically people haven't copied these Momo decks and brought them to events in droves, but you never know if this might be the time that's different, right? We've got a bit of a slower format. People might be a little more into trying this out. It's a bunch of time to test before the event, so I put this on the list here. What's the next symbol? Life! Oh, life overhaul. Okay, well, this is... It obviously has to be in here. I don't actually remember how close this is to exactly Andrew's list. It's probably pretty close to exactly Andrew's list. Nothing you haven't seen or heard about by now. He can be a little slow out of the gate because he's overhaul, because every overhaul is, but once he finds a passing torch, gets enough foundations out that the pickup doesn't feel like it's costing him that much. He kind of gets rolling. He can play really good long-term defense with, he doesn't have the infinite speed reduction as Momo, but life has plenty of that on its cards, right? And he's picking up blocks from his stage and, fixing zones with co-op offer and whatnot. And he will, if you defend him well enough and he needs to really work hard to kill you, he can try to assemble a triple tongue whip turn, or, heroic into repeat dispatch type of turn. I put 1x maximum overhaul in here as a trick and angle it can show up. It's a bigger deal in the Earth build. It fills more gaps that the Earth build sort of has compared to the Life build, but I did put one in this list. But yeah, there's plenty of Life overhaul lists for you to look at, but for the purposes of this exercise, of course, he has to be in the gauntlet, right? That's the other Life deck. Oh, it's a Life Recovery Girl. Yes, of course. Yeah, you should test against Recovery Girl. You should make sure, because Recovery Girl fundamentally is very capable of having like an 80-90% matchup against you if your deck just aligns with what she's very good at stopping. In particular, I included both the sort of quote-unquote broken loops in this build. So this is mostly modeled after Travis's list, but also some of the stuff that I've seen Sean do locally that I think is very good. So it's doing both the Ruthless Mockery, Bewildered. If your attacks don't do enough damage, I'm just going to just HP soak you out of the game loop. And it's also running the All Smiles stuff, where... So if you haven't seen this, All Smiles destroys to make you destroy a foundation. You've used it a couple times. And then if you have a few of those, Recovery Girl can keep bringing All Smiles back and just keep shutting down your Brute Strength, your Release, whatever it is. We are going with the powerful base lineup pretty much, as opposed to the focus attack lineup. That kind of lets us, I think, get away with a thicker deck, because we're not so specifically trying to find this one card, right? Or, Sean's focus attack build is also pretty thick, but he plays it every week at locals, right? And we've seen plenty of games where he just never finds his real attacks, right? The nice thing about just playing the repeated forceful blow setup is that you have plenty of real attacks, and so you don't really care too much which ones you're drawing, so you can go a little bit thicker to make sure that you don't lose the game because you cycled. But yeah, it's Recovery Girl. She tries to block and absorb some damage with Ruthless or Bench Press, and then start building things in. And if she, at some point when she wants to find her offense, she gets Carbo loading out there, and she can make these throws that are all 9 damage, or that are even powerful even. And yeah, she will put you on a clock unless you have a ton of throw defense, and she can be kind of tough to fight into, but it's very much a if your deck can get up and over and kill Recovery Girl, then it doesn't feel like it was that hard, right? Your deck can just do that. You've past the bar, right? You need to be this tall to ride. If you're that tall to ride, it can be not that much of a problem, but if you're not tall enough to ride, it can be a big problem. So definitely take a chance to test against some recovery girl play, because some decks just that are perfectly valid otherwise just get blown out by this thing. Order. We have an Order Shigaraki 3. This is largely taking cues from the Rochester list. That was kind of interesting. Figured I'd go ahead and include it here. I'm not sure how many people are going to key off of it, but a lot of people do like this character. I've been looking to play him for a little while, so see how many of this show up. But, you know, it is, you know, a different kind of deck that is worth checking in and testing against. So this is a rare list, and I'm actually doing this in both order lists here, but this is using Making a Stand to find its damage, pretty much. So it's playing a bunch of attacks with stun, and I modified it a little bit. I'm playing some Giant Bite Tensions as another dunk for the deck, and also Repeated Seal Toss, because there are some people that are looking for decks to do Repeated Seal Toss Award the Victor in, which is a cute little loop, and it actually made sense in this pile, so I put it in here. But this could also be Vanquishing Punch, for instance. Could be, you know, a bunch of stuff that you were seeing in the actual Shigaraki list. But anyway, you know, one of the cool things is playing Inverted Night Throw to try to guarantee that it gets that momentum for Shigarakis once per game. And, you know, it's Shigaraki. It's drawing cards, it's playing some defense, it's playing some pokes. If it catches you in an exposed state, it can activate it once per game and slam some 1.3 million volts on you. Otherwise, you know, it stinks and dunks if it has a Making the Stand out, or can be doing 5 or 6 or something like that. Vile Seasoning will come for 7. So, you know, he can be a unique deck to play into because he's drawing so many cards on, you know, a symbol that's not, you know, just life doing infinite defense. He's doing this on order and playing with all those defensive tools instead. So the other order deck I have here, I went ahead and put my Order Sato on here. This is, I say a lot, I think this is probably the best deck I registered for an event this year, even though I didn't quite top with it. And this is an interesting mix. So it is an order repeated deck, right? Which you can do. Reminder, Repeated Smash has order. We've pretty much only seen it on Life and Void so far, but you can totally do this on order, whether it's Sato, whether it's with Rappa or something else. But the reason you don't see it on order is because a lot of people, you want to play 1.3 million volts and Vile Seasoning on order, and we're doing that here, and we're just playing those, and then everything else is a punch. And for Sato, that's made kind of easier because he's very, very good with Final Smash. And one of the reasons to have this deck in the Gauntlet is because you could see this or another Final Smash deck or something like that where you actually want to think about going to 8 foundations, right? If you can stick at 7, then it's worthwhile. Because if you go to 8, then the Final Smash string can start showing up. But this is pretty much an order good stuff pile. And, you know, the order good stuff was sort of running amok in the set 4 meta. Haven't really seen it too much in set 5. I think partially, I think just the 4th kind that people were using as the go-to for this has kind of fallen off for various reasons. So I think if you're looking for, you know, if somebody wants to run order good stuff, what character might they be using? Sato is definitely a possibility. Again, I mentioned the Making Stand here. He just makes things stun to turn this on, and of course you get the momentum hate side of this. Sato is uniquely good at running order's wide range of good actions. We're just running a pile of basically 1Xs in here. We get to main deck Blood Curdle and clown on some, you know, Monettas and stuff like that. And just more actions in the sideboard. So he just cycles them away when they're not good, which is a nice property to let a 6 hand size play a bunch of cool action cards. Yeah, this deck's pretty good. I certainly haven't written this off for my personal shortlist yet or anything like that, but pretty good representative of the order good stuff pile, I think. Two more symbols to go. Void. So Void, we got Deku 4 in here under the Void symbol. I think Life is probably going to be a little more popular and possibly even a little better, but Void does do some unique things that can be a little challenging to play against. And particularly, it's a fantastic barrier shield character, and you should definitely definitely give some thought to the possibility of running into some barrier shields in this meta. It's a pretty good answer to a lot of the stuff that's going on. Other than that, it's Deku 4. This is a tight 50 card list because we need every piece of speed we can get in the Void list. So we're playing 4x Practical Studies also for the Deadlock, and we're running 50. We want to find the repeateds. Want to find the rejuves, get some speed on our moves, find the good ones, right? And try to pull this out. But, you know, certainly a unique character to try to fight against because he just has so many cards. He'll throw his whole hand at you on his turn and then still have 3 to defend with. Worth practicing against for sure. He could show up on any of his symbols. Probably also in that 3 to 10% bucket. He's seen some success either in the bubbles of events, or I believe a couple showed up in the UK top cuts. We'll probably see some more in the UK and OCE top cuts, I would assume, at their Nats if he's as popular as he seems to be over there, overseas. But yeah, Void deck, learning the standards, has the health to absorb some hit and learning the standards you. You know, Spooky's just fine in here, has some speed hate in here to help him pass blocks. One of the things about Void is that their block mods are awful. Stopping for breakfast, a lot of decks that besides Overhaul are running some kind of action right now. So I'm trying to fit this in a little bit more in decks where it makes some sense, where I can put like one main or one side or one each or whatever. I just want to call that out looking at this. And the other Void deck is, of course, Eraserhead. Eraserhead can play all sorts of different foundation mixes. You're not, aside from you're probably going to see Nightwatch, there's not a lot of... You're probably going to see Nightwatch, and there's probably going to be 4 Red Rides, the coolest. And probably 4 tapes. And after that, who knows? But this one is, you know... I've seen enough Kevin Broberg. Here's Small and Limber. It's the Small and Limber Void or Eraserhead, basically, but with all punches. Repeated 100% smash, rejuvenating smash, the uppercuts, the chops, the rewind throttles, the erase. Yeah, it's Eraserhead. You should test against Eraserhead for sure. You know, another one of those 3 to... Maybe not 10%ers, because a lot of people think Eraserhead is too hard for them. I said before, I'm slamming learning the standards and 7-handers. I'm slamming learning the standards and 7-handers. I'm a big believer in that card right now. It's just good against it's pretty good against Overhaul, though you have to take a pretty big hit for it. Not too bad against No Moves combo strings. Like at some point you're gonna get hit, and being able to pop this emergency button to maybe save your life is pretty good. But I don't know if it's correct or not, but I slammed it in here. And then last we have the Water deck. So first of all, Water Mineta 2. Mineta 2 always finds a way to show up at these events, even if he's not at your locals. He always just... I faced 2 of these at Gen Con. He always just shows up, right? And then he's a bit of a different odd angle deck, always worth testing into. I could not tell you what the best Mineta list looks like right now. I just went with a pretty standard ranged lineup. Frigid Heatwave, Toss, Tongue Whip, Ice Storm, Great Brush. I put Sticky Ball Pitch in. It seemed like a nice way to get some guaranteed momentum. He's very good. Manifest is a nice new get for him, as well as Vast Hybrid. He has more ways to get guaranteed momentum on the water symbol, as well as some momentum protection. So he has leveled up more than you might think. The rest of the deck, who knows? I don't profess to have any great ideas about what is more or less correct to be running in these Mineta lists, but he should certainly be something that you're thinking about. You know, what if I do run into a Mineta? You know, how is that matchup? Am I just going to get clowned on by his, you know, put a foundation in my card pool stuff? I definitely wanted to include him in here. And the last deck that we have, Water Toru 2. So I wanted to get Toru in here. I think there's a lot of... I've heard enough rumblings of people that are like, you know what, maybe I should play Toru 2, because it's certainly a way to mess with repeated decks and to kind of mess with Overhaul and some other things. That if we can make Toru work as a main character in our deck, then that could be pretty valuable. My like weird 4 Eyes of the Tiger here too. I'll repeat, I'm kind of second guessing this, but I didn't want to like go through and try to hunt down replacements for it at the last minute, so. But it does, you know, turn off Breaker and turn off some Tokuyami stuff. I believe it doesn't stop anything Wrap is doing, but it is pretty good against some number. When it's good, it's really, really good, right? Anyway, Toru 2 Water decks. So Toru got... Well, she's had Pronodias for a little bit, but we also got... So I didn't put Vast Hybrid in this one, but that is a card that you can play as a way to try to get some damage in your water character. But, you know, she does have some... Surging Crystal Darts is the one I should really be calling out here. So this is a pretty thick deck, and you know, really what we're doing here is giving ourselves a big bomb attack that we can play in our Toru deck, which she Off of air, she's gotten to do that with 1.3 million volts. This one's a little bit scarier, has some built-in deadlock, isn't quite as predictable. Right, it's not like, okay, well, there's a 3-speed low, I'll just hold, you know, any sort of, you know, any cheap low block and I'll be able to do it. This has a little more speed printed on it. They don't get to play around it by just not committing things, etc., etc. The weird thing about this list is it has 3 4 difficulty low attacks and 3 5 difficulty high attacks, which is kind of bizarre, but again, very version 0. Just kind of put the stuff in that I thought made some sense. Invisible infiltration, resetting water defensive pieces can be very good. Even if you have the momentum for it, you can reset a broken psyche. That's kind of crazy. I'm just discovering this now, but yeah, you know, obviously tongue whip strings can do a lot of damage. Invisible infiltration has a good damage on it. Frigid heat wave can end up doing damage. You get the powerful on ice storm, that can do a lot of damage. So, you know, we have the damage thing solved, and Toru can handle most of our speed. So, in theory, there could be a deck here. It might be that you're more likely to see Toru off of air just because that's the one that won in RLE, right? But I think there's possibly something to the water Toru, and if you want to get a Toru in your gauntlet to test against, I think this is a fine place to start. Alright, and that's everything. That is 24 feasible gauntlet decks that you could try testing your Nats thing against. I don't know if anybody has time to actually do like a match or two against all of these things, let alone, you know, other symbols of stuff that weren't on here, right? But definitely something, even just to like look at these and think about like what is my matchup into this, that sort of thing. So, you know, obviously I will put a link in the description to UVS Ultra folder with all of these decks in it, so you can check them out. You throw them into TATS or whatever to test against them. And yeah, so hopefully people enjoyed this, sort of just an exploration of some different symbols and some different characters and just some things to think about what you might be facing. I don't know. Now I have to go and figure out my own actual national shortlist. I figured I would do this first and just sort of get a look at the lay of the land and then start thinking about what I'm actually going to run. But yeah, just a reminder, I'm probably going to post this. I guess it'll be Sunday morning when I post this. So if you're watching this on Sunday, then, or even afterwards, you can catch the YouTube at 4 p.m. There is going to be that Universus character fantasy draft, in which we have 9 people that are going to be in a room trying to do a fantasy draft of characters for the 3 nationals that are coming up. So that should be fun. That's 4 p.m. on the Universus Twitch and then later YouTube channel. So if you have time Sunday afternoon, check that out. Yeah, hope people like this. You know, let me know if you think. Try not to make too much fun of all my V0 decks. There's infinite card choices that you could argue about for sure. But yeah, hope it was cool. Have a good night. Take care.